Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our new quarters at 40 North Pearl Street. I'm Douglas Kellner, and I'll ask the other commissioners to identify themselves.
I'm Evelyn Aquila.
Jim Walsh and Gregory Peterson.
And then we'll ask our Board of Elections staff to introduce themselves.
Anna Savitro.
Kimberly Galvin.
Todd Valentine.
Bob Brem.
Bill McCann. Joe Burns.
Tom Connolly.
John Conklin.
Paul Collins.
John Perry.
Bob Warren.
Don Mulady.
And we have a guest. Why don't you introduce yourself? And Mr. Clear, are you here for any organization or one of the candidates?
I'm here for the Jennings campaign.
Okay. And that's Liz Hogan behind us. So the first item on the agenda is for the Board of Canvassers to certify the results of the March 20th special election for New York State Assembly. I don't see those, the paperwork.
I have my
Todd has it. We have a Senate special election that we can't certify yet. It's still in court. We constantly in contact with the City of New York, and they keep advising us that it's still being litigated, so we do not have those results for you. But we have these Sunday seats.
Yes, we should. Want to vote?
Yeah, let me just see it so I can read it.
Yeah, the whole
Thank you.
layout of that.
All right, so the resolution is to certify the election of Shelley Mayer from the 93rd Assembly District, Frank K. Scartados from the 100th Assembly District, Dee Dee Barrett from the 103rd Assembly District, and Michael P. Kearns from the 145th Assembly District. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll sign the paperwork right now.
Okay.
Best we can do with what we have.
This big pretty table.
This is mine.
Oh, that's yours. What am I signing?
Well, it's, here, it's the boards.
Oh, it's the boards?
Oh, I should do all these this way.
Anything else comes around to sign?
All right, so that concludes the work of the Board of Canvassers, and we'll now turn to the commissioners of the State Board of Elections. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of February 23rd, 2012. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion.
Those in favor of approving the minutes as prepared, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes are adopted. So next is the unit reports. We'll start with the executive directors, Bob Brem and Todd Valentine.
I think the most obvious to those watching from home and those of us in the room is we moved. It was quite a experience moving one block away, and it started the morning after the presidential primary with the movers wanting to move a few boxes. That kind of led a little bit more that day than we expected, but I think it helped us to kind of get ahead of the Thursday start. But I think the entire staff did a great job. There's always a lot of turmoil with something new, and picking up your operation in the middle of the federal political calendar 2 days after the presidential primary was always daunting, to say the least. But I think we're all settling in pretty well. Our Tom Jarose has done a great job, I think, for everybody to make sure that all of the things that were on our fit-up list was done, and we keep dreaming up. The more he gets done, the more we add to his list that we want to get done. But I think everybody in the agency did a great job in getting here, getting the hearings conducted, the research on the petitions, receiving the mail in 2 buildings, and it was an awful lot of work. We knew it was an aggressive schedule when we started meeting on the restack effort. What would work in a political calendar like we have this year, and we were very nervous. But I think, for the most part, it's worked, and it's worked well.
What are the annual savings from the move?
The annual savings are over $300,000 for rent. The parking is not 100% settled yet. They say, don't worry, it'll be provided, so we're still working on that. We have recommended, also as part of the restack, to get out of the leased space in Manans that we have for storage kind of equipment, the voter registration forms. The restack team hasn't quite gotten to that point yet. We believe there's plenty of space in the building, in the basement of this building, that's part of the OGS. We own it. So we've made the claim that we have a better purpose for that space than is currently being used for. But they were more interested in, because of our deadlines on our calendar, to actually move the agency. That was the first order of business. So that will add not quite to 350 maybe by the time between parking and that space. So that's our savings. We haven't quite worked out the new expenses that were in this building that we have to pay for any of the extra activities, but it certainly won't be anywhere near that amount. It's usually a lot less for some of the common expenses.
Well, I congratulate you in such short time to have gotten so much done. It's really like a miracle. And our staff always surprises me with how effective they can be. Thank you all.
Anything else you want to add, Todd?
Moving, and when we're still going forward, the presidential primary. I don't know if Anna's going to comment on that or not. When it was quiet, we still all the result numbers haven't been certified yet, so I don't want to steal anything Anna's going to talk about like I normally would. But we're now the reason and the timing seemed poor. In our own defense is because we also have to go through the second half of the election year, which is the Senate and Assembly filings and the rest of the party office filings, which are due right now in July, mid-July. So it was better to go through a little bit of pain now so that we'll be well settled at that point, and ready to accept things. And as we did in the last space we were in, within the first year we realized there were, you think certain things are going to work out the way you envision them on paper, much like this boardroom table, but they don't always work out in practice. So, we'll envision a series of changes. Bob and I talk constantly and trying to deal with the staff and develop the workflow, probably do the filings. We think the construction will be done. So we think we're going to be in good position to go through the second half of the year with that election, positioned well. So as far as the staff's concerned and our budget issues, this is going to resolve a big, one of the issues that we've always had with the budget is, the rent's been a big portion of that, and now that being freed from us, that's a big help as far as administering the agency. So I think we're in good shape. And also at the same time all this was going on, the state was also shifting to a brand new financial system for reporting expenses and travel vouchers. So for those who submit travel vouchers, there's a new system, so we'll have to, if you haven't already received the emails or been briefed on that, we're going to have to go over that with you at some point, because they're trying to get rid of paper. It's supposed to be paperless. Transition, not sure how it's going, because I don't deal with that on a daily basis, but it will impact you guys directly that submit travel vouchers. So we'll have a process. The process will be changed slightly, but I still think it'll function well. No, that's what's occupied our time in the last month.
I just want to say this is my fourth move since I've been on the board. This is our fourth location. I'm really not as old as that, but
We're a tough crowd, wear and tear.
All right, well, thank you. Next, we'll turn to Kim Galvin for the legal report.
Thank you. We've said mostly all of the things that we've been busy with out in our written report. Obviously, the move as well took a toll on our unit in the middle of reviewing all of the papers associated with the petitions. We have been very busy with the petition work, and there has been about 12 or 13 lawsuits filed that we've been that are associated with the petitions. We expect many of them to drop off, or some of them to drop off as a result of today's determinations. We didn't have a scanner ready to scan them, but we got one yesterday, so I'll send them out around. In addition, Tom Conley and I spent a long period of time following up with the 11 resurvey counties, as was required by Judge Sharp's one of his many orders. We worked through all that. Most of the counties were extremely cooperative. I mean, they had all the right staff. They were very well prepared. Everybody worked together. It was good. So the end result was we removed the 11 counties. We satisfied the Department of Justice with that. However, we raised questions on 22 other ones from the answers that we received throughout those 11. So we've agreed to now undertake the process of going back to, originally there was 33 counties that admitted to sending ballots out late. We resolved 11 in totality. The other 22 were being required to send out one question survey, which seems easy, and do the follow-up calls with them. We're starting them. I think the email is going out today, and hopefully by the middle of this month we will have that entire 2010 ballot situation resolved with regard to at least the numbers of things. It's been a long time coming. Other than that, we've just been busy.
Kim, on that issue, one statistic on those reports that particularly concerned me was the number of ballots that were not counted. has there been, first of all, follow-up and clarifying those numbers?
Are you talking
as a result?
specifically about the ballots that came back late that weren't counted?
That's correct.
Yes, we've gone through like 201 and tried and determined with at least those 11 that none of them, well, a very few of them have we determined that were not counted solely because of the reason that they returned late and they were mailed late. There's many reasons why certain ballots aren't counted that aren't necessarily being scrutinized by the Department of Justice. You know, for example, they send 2 ballots in, or they didn't fill it out correctly, or certain things like that. It was postmarked too late. I mean, there's a variety of reasons, but...
Well, postmarked too late is relevant, but...
Postmarked too
these
late
are-
is relevant if it was mailed out late.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But not many were just postmarked too late that were mailed perfectly timely. It's just some of the counties. Some of the counties sent their ballots out on time, and
Well,
they just
those
came
are the
back
ones
late.
that concern me, and I would urge us to do follow-up to pin down the reasons why ballots that were sent back timely, in other words, had proper postmarks from military voters, would not have been counted, and to analyze that. The number that had been reported on the initial returns on that struck me as a relatively high number, which is why we asked for further follow-up.
For those that
and-
were postmarked, returned timely, and received late and not counted?
No, received everything timely but not counted.
Everything
Yes.
received timely but not counted,
Right.
for another reason.
I think the number that were actually received late, which means after the extended deadline,
Right.
was very few. It was only,
Right.
it was less than 5, as I
it was
recall.
small.
It was just 2 or 3.
I guess I don't, I'm sorry, but I guess I don't understand the issue. So the ballots that were postmarked timely...
There were a
returned-
couple of hundred, the actual raw number that had been filed in the public report that was filed
Right.
with the court was a couple of hundred ballots that had been, that were not counted. And it didn't further break down the number in what was publicly filed, but the number was large enough that it seemed to me that we should be doing follow-up on just what those reasons were and to make sure that those causes are not being repeated.
Well, if I can say, I know with the 11 counties that we dealt with, we did really get as
we
much
did.
clarity as we could, because there were a number of them, when they initially reported to us, we had some where they had reported a couple hundred as the reason for rejecting them was other.
Other, yeah.
So, you know, after talking with DOJ, we went back to those counties and say, you can't say other, we need an actual reason why you didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is we're going to be reproducing that effort with these other 22 counties. So at the end of the day, by mid-month, like Kim said, for those 33 counties that had sent out ballots late, there should be no question mark as far as a reason why each of those ballots was not counted.
Right.
So I can provide that breakdown for you at that point once we've gotten that information from the county.
Right. I think it would be helpful because I think it's incumbent on us to follow up to make sure that we address the reasons why ballots aren't being counted so that we can correct the issues.
Right.
Just as, you know, the ultimate result of large numbers of military voters not having their ballots counted was the adoption of the MOVE Act,
Right.
which was, pretty serious remedy to address a problem that certainly had been identified for many years. But I think we should follow up that if there are still even dozens of military voters who aren't having their ballots counted, we should address what those reasons are so that we can correct them, so that in
Okay.
the future,
Well, I think it's all overseas.
The ballots will be counted.
All overseas ballots, so those who work for the
Right.
the government and things like that. What was the total?
The total number of
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
ballots sent out, rejected, or which one?
The total that weren't counted, that we filled out weren't counted.
I
Wasn't a big number.
Well, it was in the
Oh, big
hundreds.
enough, no, yes, it was. It was, but I mean, considering it was too many. If it was one, it was too many, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I'm trying to think that the number was just about 200.
No,
Am I
It
wrong?
was more than that.
It was more than that.
Yeah, 214?
No, I think it was,
See, I wrote 214, I don't know why.
I'll have to go back.
But you're right, Commissioner, if there's some,
Yeah.
some identifiable reasoning, perhaps we could take some
Yeah.
prophylactic measures to
Yes.
correct it.
All right, well, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that. Is there anything else, Paul? Did you want to add anything?
Just to advise that yesterday afternoon, I received word from the Attorney General's office that there's been an application to intervene in the Favors v. Cuomo case down in the Eastern District. That is the case that resulted in the federal court drawing the congressional lines. And the second half, or second and third halves of that case have to do with challenges to the state assembly and senate redistricting. And we, in that proposed intervention complaint, we have been named as a defendant, although the thing it says about us
Yeah.
is we're responsible for administering the election law, calendar, et cetera. So we'll send it down to the Attorney General and ask him to represent.
Right, we're not going to take a position in that litigation, and so therefore,
Yeah.
we don't need to.
Redistricting always has this problem.
Just like the Cohen.
Not new.
And none of the commissioners are named in the lawsuit, so there are no Section 17 of the public officers
All right.
issues.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We'll turn to election operations. Anna Sfizzero.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our monthly report seems a little slim, but we didn't have much time to think, so I'm not quite sure why it seems slim. But in any event, we do have a couple of issues apart from, excuse me, what appears in your report. One is the report that we provided the commissioners for information on the Bronx overvote matter, and I would ask Bob Warren to give you a brief summary of that report, and if you have any questions, Bob and John Ferry of our unit were in the Bronx with some other staff people working on that issue, so he can summarize that for
Bob, why don't you
you.
stand over here?
Okay, we went down on February 29th to do some research and get a background on what happened, with the system and during the election. This was a 2010 general election that after the election was over, it was reported that this unit had reported a high number of overvotes, much higher than would ever be anticipated. So we went down, we got some background information from the Bronx, and then we went in, we burned some media from the election, the 2010 election, and we rescanned ballots that were marked during that election, the exact ballots that were run during the election. For the first hour and a half, we received nothing. Everything was scanning fine. So we were beginning to wonder if, there might have been something else. So we decided, well, in a poll place, you're not going to scan ballot after ballot. Some ballots will scan, the machine will sit, other ballots, and it'll be through the course of the day. So we thought we'd let it set for a while. And then we said, well, maybe we should recreate some of the issues that could occur in a poll site, which would be lighting, so maybe some lighting was flashing into it or something. So we tried, we decided we'd go ahead and try that. Well, as we started to try that and scan ballots, we started to get some phantom overvotes. So we weren't quite sure at that point if it was from this lighting that we were trying or what. So we went to lunch, we came back from lunch, we continued to scan, and we continued to get the phantom overvotes. So at that point, we felt that it had something to do with the machine heating up. That maybe the machine was getting too hot, it was doing something to the scanning. We had the Bronx scan let the machine cool down, rescan some ballots the next morning. When it was cooled down, they didn't receive the issue. So we still thought it had something to do with the heating. On April 4th, we went back and we had ES&S engineers attend also. So they started looking at the machine. They brought a device that could measure the heat of the unit. We began scanning ballots again. Nothing, for the first hour and a half or so. They were beginning to doubt also. They thought, maybe we were wrong. But all of a sudden, the issue started happening, and they started getting the phantom overvotes. And the machine seemed to, just in appearance, it seemed like it had heated up quite a bit. It was at about 38, 40 degrees on the internal of the system. So we weren't quite sure if that was abnormal or not. They said that they had done some prior testing and that the unit normally gets 15 degrees Celsius higher than the room temperature. That's pretty much what it was, but they were going to go back and do some further tests. So as we were scanning the ballots and they were getting the issue, they had been testing everything out. Everything on the machine appeared fine, so they decided to recalibrate the system. So they recalibrated the unit. We took some of the ballots that had produced the overvotes, and we rescanned all those ballots, and they all scanned fine. So it appears that this unit had gone out of calibration. Whether in the New York City procedures, they do have a procedure where they clean and recalibrate every unit before the election. So, I mean, it's possible somebody missed it and it didn't get recalibrated, but it's also possible that they did their job, the machine was shipped to the poll site, and during shipment or even during use that day, it went out of calibration. We asked the engineers, why didn't it, as soon as the machine started up, report these overvotes? And he said, it's most likely that when the machine reached its optimum temperature for operation, the 15 degrees Celsius over the room temperature, that it just kicked in the miscalibration. And it appears what was happening is the ballot was scanned, the image of the ballot was distorted. So then when the system, the programming, looked at the ballot to analyze it for votes, it was looking, the program was looking where it was supposed to look, but the ballot was distorted, so it was picking up some other part of the image that would record a vote where it shouldn't be.
Bring back the lever machines.
But also we had the Bronx let the machines sit that night, and the next day we asked them if they would go ahead and scan another 100 ballots after it had cooled down to make sure that recalibrating it when it was heated up didn't have any effect, and it had no effect. So it appears that the machine is functioning fine after the calibration.
So are we in a position to release the report?
After today's meeting, we'll be sending it to New York City, and we'll share it with the other ES&S customers as well.
But we did say that the county should also...
And with the federal, the FEC, and the...
EAC.
The EAC
Yes, we have a contact there, Joshua, I can't think of his last name.
Franklin.
And
the machine guy.
we let him know whenever we have issues and what the resolution of them had been.
It certainly is a significant finding that, in terms of a problem with the use of the machine that we now have to be aware of.
And the county should have a procedure in place where something of an abnormality, like, 90 ballots cast and you have 75 overvotes out of that, they should look into it a little bit more, when they see it on the tape. So, get that machine included in the audit. Just throw it right in the audit and let it.
Well, it's hard when the inspector sees that at the end of the night. You got to realize that's where the problem for
But the voter is getting the overvote notice during the day.
That was the issue. If the election had been a little more current, we
That's
could
the
have
one piece we
contacted
never
the
figure out.
inspectors.
Because it was recorded. We looked through the log. We had the...
And it was
The SS was
recorded?
all,
Oh, okay.
as cast as is, cast
Give you a
as
red
is.
flag
So
there, but
That makes it
Yeah.
more of a dilemma.
that you can't, who knows?
well, the voters are ignoring.
Well, that's an issue we should look at further. I noticed that in the draft of the report, there are affirmative recommendations of what to do to address the problem in the future. So I think it will be of interest to get that released as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thank you for following up on it.
Thank you very much.
Some of it.
I don't want Bob to go too far. We have another ES&S issue. It's a warranty issue. There are some 1,700 machines in New York City and 30 in Rockland that the vendor has identified and they're trying to be preventative. There is an issue or a potential issue with the rollers that capture the ballot and draw it into the scanner, that they've found that the rubber that constitutes those rollers is less than optimum. They have researched a couple solutions. Their solution right now is to make changes in the rollers that they purchase when they build machines, and for the machines they've identified in a certain lot number, they are going to go out to those, all 5 boroughs in New York and in Rockland for those 30 machines there, and replace those rollers for those counties. We contacted our testing lab, and they agreed that it's warranty work. It doesn't reflect the certification at all. It's an issue that they have discovered, and that they're being preemptive in resolving it. So we have no issues based on our consultation with SLI to have the vendor go forward and make those upgrades to those units that they've identified.
Who is SLI?
The testing lab, our certified lab.
I have a question on it, Anna.
Yes.
I have when this came up, I asked this question of Todd, and I have an old fax machine, so it goes back several years, and it has a roller system on it. And when the roller is in need of maintenance, it comes right up on my little screen that tells me that this is to be cleaned. Now, in all these technology improvements over the years, can't they have something in this machine that just indicates that the rollers need to be cleaned or disposed of, or they've used their useful life?
We can certainly talk to them about it, because the outcome here is when they act up, if you will, there could be ballots jammed, and we know what kind of problem that can create in a polling place, and we don't want to have that problem. But we can certainly talk to the vendor. We have regular conference calls with them and ask them if there could be an alert through the maintenance process or the pre-election process that just warns the board that these rollers need either replacing or cleaning.
Yeah.
We can make that.
My son said the same thing.
We can make that part of our next conference call.
Thank you.
I was asking him what he thought, because he's great on all this electronic stuff. He said, you got to clean them, you got to take care of it. You probably knew that too, I'm sure.
All right, Anna, you still have the floor.
I don't think I need it anymore.
Ballot redesign and usability project.
I'll defer to Joe.
The only thing to add, I think Kimmel mentioned, is there are a couple of bills in the legislative package that have to do with ballot redesign and usability. That's about it.
Joe, is there a regular process in place now for raising usability issues with the counties?
It's something we communicate with them on. I'm not sure what you mean by regular.
Are we getting ballot templates now?
Oh, yeah.
So that there is input from your usability group on the ballots that are being used in the primaries.
It's something we discuss with the counties, no question, right?
All right, that's good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna and Joe. So public information, John Conklin.
Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather today, so I think we included just about everything in our written report. Obviously, we're involved in a move like every other unit in the building, so I'm basically going to let the written report stand unless you guys have any questions or unless Tom wants to add anything.
So, we're good? Yep. Thank you. All right, then campaign finance.
Thank you, Commissioner. Pretty much what we have been involved in since the last meeting is in our written report. I've given you the statistics, as I always do, about relative to the different areas of the workload in campaign finance intake and processing, so you're aware of the volume that we're under. If I could point out two things relative to the report. I want to reiterate that for the non-filing of the January 2012 periodic, we did sue 511 people. There seems to be, many times there seems to be some criticism that we don't enforce relative to these issues, but this is how we enforce. We sue these people for not filing, and next year, when we review this year's non-filers, as we always do, we refer hundreds of people to the district attorney for prosecution. That is the extent to which we can go by statute. I want to reiterate to you that we are doing that. The other thing I'd like to point out to you is that our seminars, our campaign finance seminars have started. this week. I think the first one was on Tuesday in Ulster. They are today in Dutchess. There will be 19 across the state. For the first year, we are offering in 4 locations CLE credits for attorneys who are attending, and I know that was at Commissioner Kellner's instigation over the past couple of years, and we have gotten the approval for that. So this is the first year that we're able to do that. Other than those are the highlights. Of course, everybody has said with the move, it's been tough, but we have attempted throughout this move. I know some filers were inconvenienced. If you hear from people that couldn't get through, we apologize, but our system was down. We did the best we could, and that about covers it, unless Bill has something to add.
No, and it was really just a short outage.
It was. We were out for like a day and a half or something on our system. So.
All right, and of course we'll come back to you and Bill when we discuss the independent expenditure regulations on the regular part of the agenda.
He's sick today.
Information technology.
Yeah, Dan is out sick today, and we didn't get a chance to brief anybody else to come in. But the one major project that they continue to do, while we have moved, yes, there's still a little piece of us left over at the old building, which is the data center for the statewide database, campaign finance. That's scheduled to move at the middle of this month. It'll be at a remote location up at the state office campus. So they're busy preparing that site for us. Right now, all of our systems, and I gave them credit as when I talked to them personally, but we started packing up on Wednesday. We moved on Thursday, started Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, the phones had all moved over. The computers were operational. Printers, to a lesser extent, as they got located and were hooked up, were operational. Copiers. So by the end of the day, on Thursday and into Friday, everybody's electronics were hooked up. So, I have to give them the credit for that. We have a bridge temporarily working to our old building. But the next phase is moving that. They won't say this, but they have some anxiety about that because that center was built in site. It was built in position. It was developed there. We've never moved it before, and it's been there for a number of years. So, there's always going to be a little bit of a scare when you move a lot of hardware like that. Obviously, we have a professional mover for that. So right now they're testing the communication system, the protocols between here and there, so that they can remotely operate that. So I'm not expecting, and we're not expecting any problems, but obviously we'll be down for a short period during mid-May. Whether it's probably at least 2 days to 1 day to pack up, to move and then reset up again. That could extend to 3 days if there's any hiccups, but we're not expecting it. So. But we don't know the exact date yet because they still haven't finished constructing the site over there. So I don't know if Bob wants to add to that.
That's why when we looked at when we could do this, we looked at the March 20th village elections, the special elections, the presidential primary, the federal primary. All of the periods of time where the counties have to print poll books, and that window around printing the poll books where the database has to be available to them. And this was the period of time where we thought gave us a small window, very small, that we could convert this activity. We were given assurances from OFT that they would have been ready to make the move to the database already, and then somewhere along the line they said it would be 2 weeks later. But we still can fit that window and not impact any county voter registration, poll book printing. Even if they're down a day, that's one thing depending on when. But if it's at that critical period of time for printing poll books, we'll just have to delay it. But we think we're well on track to get it done and not impact the counties in a way that will make it impossible for them to do their work.
If I may, just since we're on the topic, I would like to take the opportunity, if there are any counties watching, to remind them that now, if they haven't started already, to start sending over the new district information in their voter registration systems. We're going to be following up internally and checking to make sure that they're providing the new district numbers so that the database is as up-to-date as it can be.
And what is the deadline for the counties to provide the new district information on the database?
I don't know if we've actually set one yet. I think I still need to kind of, we did put something in place last week where we'll be able to run reports to see which counties are not sending the correct district numbers that they should be. So I honestly don't have a grasp yet on what that universe is yet. So once we take a look at that, we'll start to be able to reach out to those counties and try to make sure that
But
they...
we're talking about several weeks, not months, before they
Yeah.
have,
Yes.
before they have to
Most
have
are
the
done.
correct numbers
Right.
in the database,
I
right?
I think most are done. I heard from John Jennings last week when he had called about some question, and he said they had just finished the last of the NTS counties, so that was, they had 50 customers. Certainly the ES and S counties, we can follow up in New York City. So I don't really think it's going to be, I mean, we really have to know for sure, but I think the counties have done an awful lot of work. One of the main issues that they couldn't make live up until they printed the poll books for the presidential primary is the presidential primary was on the old 29 congressional districts. And then they had to be able to keep that those lines in place for the poll books, and then they could convert to the new 27. So it all depends on their timing, when they converted those, finished the Assembly and Senate work.
Now, everyone except New York City actually prints their poll books from the state database? Or are there other
Well,
counties
they all have to
besides-
use our state database, because in order to print your poll books, you have to audit against the state database to make sure the data is correct, and if the data doesn't match exactly, the name can't appear in the poll book. So that's why they all have to use, there is that match that takes place.
Including New York City.
And they do that now.
Okay.
It's one of the last steps, is, like New York and I think Suffolk, and all of them, they all put in, do all your work, but then you can't just go immediately to print from that second, because it takes a couple of minutes to make sure that the audit comes to Albany and gets back to your county. So there's usually we freeze get your work done on Wednesday, make sure all the audits happen. Depending on the size of the area, New York City, if they did a whole bunch of changes all at once, like redistricting work, it may take, a matter of an hour for those audits to clear. So if you are doing a changing of redistricting work for all of your records, it's just a matter of timing for that to clear up.
Well, that's helpful to explain that. Thank you. All right, well, that concludes the reports. We have one item on old business, which is to review the proposed legislation for 2012. Kim, is there anything you want to add? Paul?
No, sir, other than it went out on April 3rd, as we had indicated that it would, with all copies being sent to all of you and to all of the appropriate parties at the legislature.
So if anybody wants that, they can just send us an email and we can forward that to them.
Yeah.
Post on the website?
All right.
I think we could even
We
post
posted
it
it
on the
last year. I don't know if we
website.
posted it yet.
In the past, if you send it to me, we'll post it.
Okay.
All right, and for new business, we have the rulings on the designations and objections to petitions for the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. And we have a written report.
I believe there's 3.
I have it right here.
Should we vote on them all together, or do you want to?
Would you like me to just briefly explain what they are for the people listening? I
Go ahead, why don't you summarize it, Kim?
I don't know what particular order they're in, but there's a hearing summary, which obviously shows candidate's name and any hearings that were held on their petition, and the staff recommendation is in the far right corner. The second is labeled the staff report on prima facie review. Basically, we're advising as to what came in late, whether it be an objection, a petition, a specific objection, and other matters that would prima facie invalidate the petition or the document in question. And the last one is no acceptance or authorization report. For those listening, you need 3 parts to make a petition in its entirety valid. When it's a non-party member filing the petition, you need the petition itself, an authorization from the party, and an acceptance of that line. And so That report sets out what parts were missing in that process and what districts they were associated with.
All right. Is there any objector or candidate or their representative who wants to be heard by the commissioners? All right. So is there a motion to adopt the report as presented?
So moved.
Those in favor of adopting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So they are adopted. All right. Next is the proposed independent expenditure regulations. Liz and Bill, you want to tell us, summarize the status right now?
Well, Commissioner, the regulation as it was posted to the State Register for public comment is still the version, obviously, that is before you. The public comment period ended, I think it was April 9th. We received 4 public comments through that posting. We received public comments from Citizens Union, the Brennan Center for Justice, Common Cause New York, and the League of Women Voters of New York. In sum and substance, and those comments are in your packet as well for you to have reviewed. There are a number of issues that are raised throughout those comments, and certainly the board, through staff, Bill and myself, will address each of those issues that are raised in these comments at the appropriate time before discussion with you, and having provided you the comments for your own review. The most predominant and certainly the most prominent comment relative to the draft regulation is that relative to express advocacy as opposed to issue advocacy, the commenters did not feel that the draft went far enough, that they don't feel that, they feel it was too limiting. The draft as it was presented and put together by Bill and myself reflected what we believe after a review of the case law in New York, the timing of the case law in New York, and the application of the policy of the board relative to express advocacy. We believe that the draft reflected that. There is some area of discussion to be had relative to whether express advocacy in New York really means more than that. And Bill and I have looked at case law. We've looked at the federal election commission regulation and their basis for coming to acceptance of issues like functional equivalent of express advocacy, as opposed to being just those bullet words, to meaning more, to being more expansive, and to being open to really an interpretation on an individual basis. When we've looked at the Campaign Finance Board, they have a new regulation in New York City based upon the amendment to the city charter, which they then took and went to draft an independent expenditure, which that board has adopted. So where we are at this point is, having presented this material to you commissioners, is a discussion of what your concerns might be or what you would like to discuss relative to those points raised by the commenters. Bill, do you want to add anything at this point?
No, it's very concise. I just wanted to say a few things. That I read the comments that had been submitted, and I agree with the summary of the comments, which is that they all seem to feel that we did not go far enough in defining express advocacy. The statutory mandate was that we do regulations to the fullest extent of the existing law. So the two elements in that are that we do it within existing law and that we do it to the fullest extent. The problem is that, I should say, my understanding is that at this time, everyone has agreed that issue advocacy is not covered by the existing law, and that therefore our regulation would not address issue advocacy. On the other hand, express advocacy is covered by the law, and what we need to do is help define what the scope of express advocacy is so that the lawyers have a black and white definition that's useful in giving advice to clients as opposed to gray areas. And also, for our own enforcement, it seems to me that it's difficult for us to enforce in gray areas because we have such a strain on resources as it is. If it's going to be a gray area, then we're unlikely to proceed to enforce just because of the allocation of resources. So my suggestion is that Bill and Liz continue to work on reviewing the other regulations, but to try to address the definition in the way that the Brennan Center memorandum lays out, because I think the Brennan Center memorandum does pick up this distinction between express advocacy and issue advocacy in a way that we can work with and would make sense.
I agree with you, Doug. You know, I think that people feel like their hands are tied sometimes because of the rules we have, and I think we have to look these things over every once in a while. You know, it is 2012. And, Brennan Center is not wrong. Not in all of it, but a lot that it says here. And I think we should take a chance to see what is doable and what isn't, if everyone agrees.
Do you have any
It
thoughts
needs
on
more
this?
work, I'm sorry, that's the only thing.
Well, I certainly think that, that Liz and Bill can look into it a little bit further, because I think there needs to be a coordination between the remedy and what presently exists.
Yes,
so that we don't wind
absolutely.
up with a conflict and
Right.
wind up with lawsuits later on. We really have to have something that's defined. If we're going to try to resolve the problem, we should resolve it in a way that hopefully is done.
Right.
Rather than put a patchwork in where we wind up with a Band-Aid and then have a headache later on. So
I
I think
agree with that.
they've certainly made the right analysis at this juncture, and I think if we delve into a little bit more, we can come up with some answers.
I agree with you, Greg, I think to some degree, because I think so many things have changed just in the last 5 years that it's important that we keep up with them, and I think somehow we have to do some kind of an analysis and look and say, how can we get more voters to the poll? How can we make it easier for them? And how can we take away some things that are just obstacles? And I think we have to find those things out. I certainly don't have the good way of saying it, you know. I don't have the legal words or the, you know. But I think that we should always be on the side of the voter, and we want to get that voter voting, and we want to get the, not have so many rules and laws and things that keep people from wanting to go and vote. And I think we have to look at that from the top to the bottom. And I don't want to pile this up on any two people in this office. With such a small office, but I think we have to start looking in that direction and look at the Brennan Center as an enabler for us, not someone who we want to push away.
Well, when it comes down to it, I mean, what you don't want to do is adjust the gray area. What you want to do is be able to define it so it's black or white.
Absolutely.
And it's not
As
that
I
easy.
said, I don't have the language of the lawyer, so
That's-
you just had it. Yes, I agree.
It's really common sense.
I'm
Common
in
sense.
agreement also in that if we pass something or we make a rule, the chances of ever changing it are always very slim and very difficult. So let's take our time and do what we all believe in and we have a majority support for.
Well, I suppose there's always that feeling of urgency when we have a presidential election, you know. That comes with the presidential election.
All right, so I think that we have a consensus on at least the principles guiding it, and I realize the devil is in the details in trying to
Absolutely right.
get language that does give real guidance to the public on this.
And I think the counties are glad when they get it from us.
Well,
They're glad
this
when-
is actually addressed to the election lawyers who
Yes.
have to provide advice to groups that are doing advocacy in terms of whether they are required to make disclosures of their expenditures. And if they are merely advocating on issues of general public concern, then the disclosure rules do not apply. But if they are advocating in support of the election of candidates or in support of referenda issues that are on the ballot, then they're required to make disclosures. The only issue is where is the boundary between those two definitions? Yeah, okay.
But I have faith, this board has always been in favor of the voter.
All right, then the next is the new regulations to address the new address for the State Board of Elections. And I realize that this should not be a controversial resolution, but
I'm opposed.
but I am still interested in a report on what happened to the amendment to the regulations that we adopted, I believe now 4 years ago, that are still not officially published.
Well, that's a good question. And the day you asked it was the day after all of our board minutes were boxed up and sealed. And we discussed with Anna, and it really predated Paul.
I didn't work there either.
Because it was like right when when Pat was leaving, and in our recollection that it went over as a consensus reg because the main issues that you were talking about was when the legislature changed the statute that we couldn't ask for some of the certifications from the vendors.
That's right.
And we adopted it, so we still haven't unpacked those boxes yet. So what we did was this one first, and we've all talked about, I know Todd and Anna and Kim and Paul, we're going to pull that out. We believe we've actually adopted it, but I don't know what happened to the paperwork, so we will follow up, and if we have to submit another set, we will, but we're on it to the extent.
And I guess I'm sufficiently frustrated now that this should be on our agenda every month until I can go online and see that the Secretary of State says that the text has been changed, even though we voted on it years ago.
Just one agenda.
Well,
all right. All right, as to changing the regulations to show our new address at 40 North Pearl Street, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The HAVA complaint funding resolution. Liz,
Commissioner-
you want to just give us a one-sentence
Right, and I
explanation?
would like to point out that for some reason, the copy that was put in your packet was the resolution from 2010, but there is a resolution for this year, and I distributed copies of that to you. Basically, what this is the HAVA requires that we employ through retainer a dispute resolution mediation service or arbitration service, and we do so through a previously trained group that Bill and I have dealt with. This is the routine annual resolution to be able to pay the retainer from HAVA funds.
What is the current retainer that we're paying now?
$10,000, I believe, isn't it?
What's the sum not to exceed 15?
Right. I believe we pay 10. We've had to take some money for training purposes up to, that's why it says up to the 15. But I think the retainer, if my memory serves me, is 10 itself.
Yeah, it's 10 and an additional 5.
5 for training issues and things like that,
And-
if we need it.
And is that expenditure appropriate in view of the fact that there wasn't a single complaint filed?
Well, that's
last year?
that's a matter of I guess this is a statutorily required retainer.
Right.
The HAVA demands it, and that's why we do it. Whether we use their services or not, we still have to have them retained to call upon should we need them.
Right, and just to add a couple of factors to that. One is, it is under federal statute and under the state counterpart. And then secondarily, because of the unique it has to cover the whole state. When we went out and solicited proposals for that initially, there are very few entities that can provide across the state services that we require under the limited time frame of the regulation. So it's not like you can have, so we initially did actually a great deal of work to ascertain who might be able to provide these services. And so the long and short is it's a statutory requirement and we're in compliance, and that's where the expenditure comes.
And also, should we...
I guess the issue is that there's been one complaint filed in the 4 years that this has been in place.
No,
Well,
but this
again,
only...
This is only a secondary phase. The way
Exactly.
the regulation works is that if a HAVA complaint is not resolved within the statutory and regulatory time frame, it automatically gets kicked to arbitration for an alternative dispute resolution processing.
Right.
So we've never had an issue that would require it to go to the arbitration.
And we might
So
never
it's not
do
even
that.
one, it's zero.
That we have never used this
have-
arbitration
but we have to have
service, that's correct.
Yeah, but maybe if we did, was this rebid?
Well, right. Well,
Was this particular $15,000 appropriation rebid? Or are you
No.
just using the existing contract?
The existing contract.
If we let everybody know that this system has not been used, do you think we might get bids lower than 15,000?
well, first of all, the 5,000 is not, it's a 10,000 administrative fee. So the 5,000 is just if we have additional. The 5,000 is a set aside because you actually have to pay the arbitrators if you ever get to use them. So it's 10,000 is the administrative fee and the 5,000 is the set aside.
Right, and it strikes me that there are a lot of law firms that might be willing to bid a lot less than that
Well, but there
to
is-
perform that service.
But they would have to have the
on-
ability to provide it across the state, and they would also have had to have been trained, which we did. We provided a full day's training for every arbitrator that we might use from this particular entity, relative to the
Yeah,
type of complaints and those kind of. So it wasn't just, have a law firm on retainer
I remember
and
the training
there was a lot involved.
Well, if I could also add to that, there was also a disability aspect because because of the various aspects of HAVA relative to polling place access, for instance. If someone had made a complaint relative to that went to arbitration, we anticipated providing these arbitrations around the state for a convenience factor as well,
Right.
because of some of those disability aspects. So it's actually a limited group of folks who, for instance, our current vendor is the New York State Alternative Dispute Resolution Association, Nysboe. They provide these services throughout the state and every county, and so they have the ability. Also, I would add that at the time we went out for this, we had initially anticipated, for instance, using the American Arbitration Association, other ones, and it was through the Attorney General's office and their lemon law program, and then speaking with other agencies, that many other state agencies have contracts with Nysboe to provide these very same services because of the breadth and scope of what they're able to offer. So I feel very comfortable that it's a de minimis amount of money relative to being in compliance with the statute and having it available in the case we should ever need it.
Well, I don't think there's any question we need to vote the resolution because we have to authorize the expenditure of the money. I just raised the question of whether the fees, even though, you say it's de minimis, the level of work and services that are provided are so small that it strikes me that it's still a larger number than might be appropriate.
Well, there is one
Given
option.
the history. Given the history, that's all. In other words, if they're already trained and they're already in place, do we need to continue that much? But, I don't want to make a federal case out of spending $10,000. But
We can always look to renegotiate the contract at any time, so.
and I'm just
part of it-
suggesting that maybe it's appropriate to do that in view of the, when we put this in place, we had no idea
No, we didn't have a baseline.
that of what was involved. I guess we could always remind the public that option is still open. That to the extent there are disputes, there is a process by which they can file complaints and have them addressed.
Yeah, I don't know what the timeline on, I don't know when their contract is up current, I don't know the
But
deadline.
certainly, we have been responsive on an informal basis. So, for example, we do follow up when we get letters from the public complaining about election administration issues, and either Anna's unit follows up on them, or it goes to the enforcement unit. So maybe, the informal procedures have led people to feel they don't need to file formal complaints.
But actually, the informal procedure is the first step in a HAVA complaint as the procedure is written. So actually, that is the appropriate mechanism. I mean, should it escalate to the point of needing to file a formal complaint, that's a whole other issue. But Anna, most of these
Liz,
HAVA
even
issues...
as we define informal HAVA complaint, though, as still a process that hasn't been
Yes.
used, right?
In terms of,
If somebody writes us a letter and says, I wasn't able to cast my ballot at this poll site because of X, that's
Generally, Anna
a
would
preliminary
respond.
inquiry, and Anna would get that and address it.
That's correct.
And I'm suggesting that because we have those procedures that do that we don't even get the technical informal complaints, let alone the formal complaints that escalate to arbitration.
But almost every complaint that, it just so happened that this particular area of the HAVA, created in statute the procedures that have been followed all along between the boards and this board relative to dealing with those things, because it's a way of taking care of these issues. I mean, if Anna calls the board and says somebody's got a problem with where this is and they fix it, that's always been the way to most effectively deal with those problems. So.
I'm comfortable, we can vote.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the resolution is adopted. The last is the order under the redistricting statute that gives the State Board of Elections authority to correct ambiguities or problems with the maps that the legislature has adopted. So we have an application that we're calling the matter of correction to the meets and bounds of Assembly District 96, and an order has been drafted to modify the statutory meets and bounds for the 96th Assembly District, for the 96th Assembly District, which is in Rockland County. Are there any questions? Does anybody want to say anything about it? Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then that order is adopted. Next, we have the preliminary determination in campaign finance enforcement, CMP 12-04, and we have dispositions not requiring preliminary determinations in CMP 12-18, 17, 11, and 10.
I think we needed an executive session to discuss.
It's just one of them that we needed to discuss?
Yes.
So, yes, Susan, but or let me just, so which one is it that we're setting aside?
The preliminary determination, the non-firing are able to be dealt with.
Okay, so the motion is to adopt 10, 17, 10, 11, 17, and 18. All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll, before we do, thank you, Susan. So,
There was a comment I wanted to make at another time.
go ahead, but 30 seconds.
30 seconds. To have a complaint issue that you brought up with such a few number, I have about 75 testimonials over 4 years of complaints from voters, and a lot of them wanted to have a complaint, but they find the process unbelievably difficult, and that is why you see so few. That doesn't mean everybody's happy with accessibility in New York. It's because the process is very cumbersome, and we even had a staff person try to help, and it was difficult. I'd be happy to talk at another time about the testimonials and the challenges people had, but there are complaints that could be issued that they just couldn't, and I don't think it's fair
Well, Sue, not that we want to encourage people to file, but I am really troubled by a characterization as being complicated, because it's really not complicated,
Thank you, Commissioner.
I
I was hoping somebody would speak up.
even a non-lawyer should be able to read this and just follow the simple instructions as to how to do it.
Well, I believe, I was not the one, so it's hearsay.
Yeah.
But so I can't speak for but there was a lady who does this, who read it, and when I brought up bringing a complaint, she said, it's far more difficult, you might as well just not bother. That's kind of the response that we got.
Well, Sue, I suggest you look at the reg yourself then, and, I mean, if you really think it's complicated, then let us know and we can talk about it, but I just can't imagine a simpler process. I wouldn't know how to simplify it.
It starts with a phone call to us, and it can start with a letter. It doesn't start with a formal complaint. It's a contact. And we respond to every piece of mail we get. We respond to every phone call.
I would like to say, Commissioner, that no one has ever called the enforcement unit for assistance on this and not gotten a response from us.
Nor have they
I'll
called
tell
my
you that.
unit, and I would vouch for Mr. Conklin's
Well,
unit.
I'm happy to show the testimonials that I've collected. I'd be happy to talk about it. I will review the reg again to see what's complicated about it. But you understand when you're talking about individuals with disabilities, which is the group that I represent, that's not all the people who might have a complaint. Some are intimidated by the process.
But that's why
But
that's why there's a provision that the counties are required to assist those people, as are we. And if we got a call from someone, we would assist them.
I've
But we
helped
never
advocates
got
who call on behalf of clients that had issues, and we've resolved them. So I find that very hard to believe myself.
Okay, as long as they're being resolved, but as I said, some of these testimonials.
We heard you, and
Thank you, Sue,
and
thank you. We appreciate
you know,
it.
if you have any comments on
What's the reg? Can you give me the statute so I can read it?
6216.
6216, and that's what?
In the reg.
6216 is the Help America Vote Act Administrative Complaint Procedure.
Okay, I'll look it up. I'll do a little analysis.
Sure, and call here and talk to you.
Commissioner Kellner.
I'll do analysis of it and see where the challenge is.
All right.
We thank you for your time.
Commissioner Kellner, could I just add one more thing in the public session?
Sure.
For all of you that have to file your financial disclosure forms, we've had some glitches with the technology and their computer system. It should be remedied. The last email I sent told you to go to the website, request a password. You should be ready to go by now.
You're talking about the senior staff and the commissioners.
I am. Those that are required to file. And I would strongly urge you to file by the 15th, even though there's been a problem in the uploading at that end.
May 15th.
May 15th.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
May 15th is
I
the new
had a
back
scratch
to
out
May?
on mine, and then...
May
I hope-
5th,
I
well,
hope
you're
that's
all
all
set,
right.
and I have it right here.
I
May
would say I had a
15th.
scratch out on mine because I did it 1, 2, 3. She mailed it to, I have 2 addresses. She mailed it to where I wasn't for 2 weeks. And then I went and picked it up, and I was answering it while we were driving in the car, so forgive
Are you
me.
saying it's your understanding it's still May 15th? The email that came yesterday said there was an extension to June 2nd.
I didn't get that one.
Sorry about that. I'll forward that to you.
But still, you know,
Whatever, finally get it.
it's clearer if you can get it done by the 15th. Once you log on and last year's pops up, unless there's significant
Right.
changes, it's a very easy process.
Right, but I think they
I
did
didn't
give us a
get the
couple
June.
weeks.
Yeah,
Okay.
they sent
Okay.
an email.
I thought you sent
directly
the
to
email.
me.
I didn't get that.
You know, one other thing with the email is that everybody still is carrying the old 40 Steuben address.
Oh, on the
Oh, I've
address.
been putting it on all mine
okay.
now.
Oh, that's a good
The
one.
staff to change the
signature.
signatures on their
Good
emails.
point.
Yep.
Well, I do go on the
All right.
computer now, but I don't send back answers. I don't know. I have to start to learn to do that. I'm looking,
on?
every morning I'm on, I look up everything. That was fast, boy.
All right.
Commissioner, did you vote to go into
Yeah.
executive session? And
Not
are we off?
yet.
Not yet.
We're getting close, though.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Kim.
You're welcome.
Meeting date.
Sure.
I suggest that we do either May 8th or the Tuesday before that. or the-
June you're talking
May
about.
I'm sorry.
This is May.
June 8th is a
No,
Friday.
so it's June 5th or June 12th?
Either one is fine with me.
don't have any
Wait,
position.
wait, I got two graduating. No, they're both on Friday. I think
So
they're both on Friday.
we're talking about June 5th as our next meeting date.
Let's see, I gotta think when her graduation is.
Oh, it's probably somewhere around here.
If there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to go into executive
June
session.
5th, please, not the 8th. I think I
Yes.
have a graduation on the 8th, okay?
June 5th.
June 5th.
First day to sign petition.
All right, so the motion before,
That's a Tuesday?
So
all
moved.
right, Evelyn?
June 5th.
Thank you. I'm
All
sorry.
right, the motion before us is to go into executive session to discuss preliminary determination, 12-04.
The 5th.
What's that day?
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Buffalo.
All right, so we'll close out the
Oh,
public
that's right,
session
the
and
following week is bad.
go into executive session.